Rain hammered against the cracked window panes of Lily Morgan's apartment, each drop echoing the exhaustion already weighing down her body. The air smelled faintly of damp carpet and the sour-sweet trace of formula powder scattered on the counter. Her arms ached from hours of rocking her twins, Noah and Olivia, who seemed to have found new strength in their cries tonight. Their wails pierced the thin walls, rising and falling like sirens, making the silence of the city outside feel impossibly far away. Lily pressed her lips against Noah's downy head, murmuring, "It's okay, baby, Mommy's here." Even though her own voice trembled with weariness, she shifted Olivia against her chest, trying to quiet her. But the baby's tiny fist clenched tighter, her cheeks flushed crimson from hunger. The refrigerator had coughed its truth at her earlier. Half a carton of milk, 1 scoop of formula, and nothing else. The image haunted her now, as if the emptiness inside the fridge mirrored the emptiness of her options. She lowered both babies gently into the battered crib she bought secondhand. The wood creaked, one rail wobbling dangerously, but it was all she had. Noah's cries dwindled to a whimper, his eyelids fluttering, while Olivia protested, her thin cries slicing the room in half. Lily brushed her damp hair from her face and whispered, "Please, just for a little while, please." Her head throbbed as if each sob from her daughter pounded against her skull. Her phone rested on the cluttered nightstand, face glowing faintly in the dimness. She stared at it for a long time, debating. Pride had kept her from dialing Melanie, her old co-worker, for weeks. She hated begging, but pride didn't fill bottles or keep the landlord's threats from pounding on her door. With trembling hands, she picked up the phone and scrolled through her contacts. The screen blurred as tears swelled in her eyes. Her fingers slipped, greasy from the formula she had been mixing, and she tapped the wrong name without realizing it. She typed quickly, desperate words spilling out before she had time to second-guess. "I hate to ask this, but I'm desperate. The twins haven't eaten properly in 2 days. I can't find any work, and my landlord is threatening eviction. I just need enough to get through the week until my interview at the diner. I promise I'll pay you back the moment I can." Her thumb hovered, then pressed send. Relief washed over her for a heartbeat, followed by dread. What if Melanie thought less of her? What if this time even she said no? Lily set the phone down and lifted Olivia again, rocking gently, humming the lullaby her own mother used to sing before cancer silenced her forever. That memory, fragile and bittersweet, carried her through the baby's cries. A buzz startled her. She almost dropped the phone as she snatched it up, bracing for Melanie's reply. But instead, the screen showed words from an unknown number. "I believe you've texted the wrong person. This is Alexander Thornhill." The name slammed into her chest like a hammer. She had read it in business articles, seen it whispered in headlines. Thornhill Enterprises, the empire that touched every corner of technology. She had once applied for a humble administrative position there, never hearing back. And now, by some cruel twist, she had just spilled her desperation into the lap of one of the wealthiest men in the country. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, frantic. "I'm so incredibly sorry, Mr. Thornhill. That message wasn't meant for you. Please disregard." Heat rushed to her cheeks even though no one could see her. It was as though she had stood naked in a room filled with strangers, her shame exposed for the world's amusement. The phone buzzed again before she could drop it. 3 simple words lit the screen. "You mentioned twins. How old?" Her breath caught, confusion tangled with fear. Why would he ask that? Why not block her, report her, or simply ignore the mistake? Her chest tightened as she typed back, hesitant. 3 months, sir. Again, "I apologize for bothering you." She waited, staring at the 3 dots pulsing at the bottom of the screen, each one a drumbeat in her chest. The room seemed to shrink, her shame pressing in, heavier than the rain outside. And then the thought hit her like a knife. In the span of seconds, she had destroyed what little dignity she had left. Even if he forgot, she would not. She had begged accidentally, desperately, to a man who lived in a world so far from hers it might as well have been another planet. Tears blurred her sight again as Olivia whimpered softly against her shoulder. Lily pressed her cheek against her baby's head, whispering, "Mommy messed up, sweetheart. Mommy always messes up," but deep down, she knew this mistake was unlike any other. It was a crack in her life, and she had no idea whether what would come through it would save her or shatter her completely. Rain still drummed against the thin windows by the time Lily finally laid both twins down again, but her heart refused to quiet. She sat on the edge of the worn mattress, staring at her phone as if it were a bomb she had just armed. The name Alexander Thornhill still glowed in the recent messages list, impossible to erase from her mind. She had expected silence after her apology. She had expected him to ignore her as if she were invisible, the way so many others had. But instead, he had asked about her twins. That single question clawed at her thoughts, pulling her into a storm of unease. She rose and paced the cramped room, stepping carefully between the crib and the stack of unpaid bills on the floor. Her chest felt heavy. Why would a man like him care about Noah and Olivia? Her mother used to warn her that when powerful people notice the powerless, it was rarely for their good. Yet something in his tone, or rather, the cold clarity of his words, lingered in her chest. The phone buzzed again. Lily froze. Her pulse quickened, her breath catching as though she had swallowed fire. She snatched the phone and stared at the new message, "And you're struggling to feed them." Her throat tightened. She wanted to scream, "This isn't your business," but the truth burned hot in her chest. She was struggling, drowning. Still, she had to protect her pride. Fingers trembling, she typed, "It's not your concern, sir. Please forget this happened." She hit send, her stomach twisting, knowing even as she typed it that it was a lie. A long silence followed, the kind of silence that makes time stretch until seconds feel like years. She sat back down, curling her arms around herself. Then, at last, the screen lit up. "Stay put. I'll send help." The words struck like lightning. Lily gasped aloud, her voice shaking in the tiny apartment. Help? From him? No, he must be mocking her, testing how far her desperation would bend. People didn't send help. Not in her life. They turned their backs. They looked away. She typed furiously, "Please don't. I didn't mean to ask you. It was a mistake. I don't want charity." No answer came this time. Only the relentless patter of rain against glass, the whimper of Olivia stirring in her crib, and the pounding of Lily's heart. She told herself it was over, that he had moved on, that billionaires didn't waste their time on poor girls with broken cribs and empty fridges. But deep in her bones, she felt a strange current shifting, like the air right before a storm breaks. Minutes later, the faint hum of engines pierced through the night. At first, Lily thought it was thunder rolling across the city, but it grew louder, sharper, until her window rattled in its frame. She clutched Noah instinctively, terror clawing at her chest. A spotlight sliced through the darkness outside, sweeping across the wet street. Her knees buckled. She stumbled to the window and pulled aside the thin curtain. Her mouth fell open. A helicopter, gleaming under the rain, hovered above the street near her building. The logo on its side, silver letters glinting like fire, was unmistakable. Thornhill Enterprises. Asterisk. Lily's breath came in ragged bursts. This couldn't be happening. Not for her. Not here. She pressed her forehead to the cold glass, tears mixing with sweat as the rotor wash rippled across the puddles below. Shadows moved in the stairwell outside her door booths, voices, firm but professional. Then came the knocked out 3 sharp raps, confident, final. She froze, clutching her baby tighter, her voice trembling as she whispered into the silence, "What have I done?" The twins whimpered in unison, their cries rising again. Lily's eyes darted between the door and the crib, fear battling with the faint spark of something she had not felt in months. Hope. Asterisk. Another knock, louder this time. A man's voice, steady but respectful. "Miss Morgan? We're here on behalf of Mr. Thornhill." Her whole world tilted. What she thought had been a humiliating mistake had somehow pulled the most powerful man in the city to her doorstep, not with empty words, but with the roar of blades splitting the night sky. And for the first time, Lily wondered if this mistake was not the end of her dignity, but the beginning of something she could never have imagined. Asterisk. The pounding on the door echoed through Lily's small apartment like a warning drum. She stood frozen in the dim light, Noah clutched against her chest, her body trembling with every beat of his tiny heart. Olivia had joined her brother in crying now, their voices filling the air, a haunting chorus of need that only deepened Lily's panic. The rain outside still lashed at the windows, but it was nothing compared to the storm crashing inside her. "Miss Morgan," the voice came again, calm yet commanding. "We're here on behalf of Mr. Thornhill. Please open the door." Asterisk. Her knees nearly buckled. Mr. Thornhill, the name alone felt too heavy for her fragile apartment, too grand for her peeling walls and sagging floors. Why would a man like him send anyone to her? Why not laugh at her text and forget it? Billionaires didn't send help. They lived in glass towers where cries like hers never reached. And yet there they were. She crept toward the door, every step a battle. Her mind spun with fear, What if this was some cruel trick? What if they had come to take her babies, claiming she wasn't fit to raise them? What if she opened the door and her entire world collapsed? She pressed her forehead to the wood, tears streaming down her face. Please, the voice urged. Softer this time. We're only here to help. Let us in before the children catch cold. Something in those words pierced her armor of fear. She glanced at the crib. Olivia's cries had grown hoarse, her tiny fists still raised in protest. Noah's eyes blinked open, searching her face with fragile trust. They needed her to be brave. They needed her to open the door with trembling hands. Lily unlatched the lock and pulled it open. Two men stood there, dressed not like thugs, but in dark coats embroidered with the Thornhill Enterprises insignia. Rain streaked their shoulders, and behind them, down on the street, the impossible sight of the helicopter blades spun, throwing spray into the night air. One of the men held a large insulated carrier, the kind used for medical supplies, and the other cradled a box stacked high with baby formula, diapers, and small bottles of water. Lily's breath caught. I don't understand. She STAMMERED. The taller of the two stepped forward, his tone professional. Mr. Thornhill received your message. He asked us to ensure your children have everything they need immediately. He nodded toward the carrier. There's food, warm blankets, and medical-grade formula for the twins. More supplies are waiting below. Her knees weakened, and she had to grip the doorframe to keep herself upright. This has to be a mistake. I didn't mean for him to. It's no mistake. The man interrupted gently. Our employer does not act on mistakes. He acts on needs. Yours were urgent. Lily could only shake her head, tears spilling freely now. Pride screamed at her to refuse, to shove the boxes back into their arms and close the door forever. But the twins' cries silenced her pride, their hungry voices stronger than the walls she had built around herself. She stepped aside. The men entered quietly, their presence filling the tiny apartment without judgment. They set the boxes near the crib, their movements precise, practiced. One placed a thick wool blanket over the crib's flimsy railing, shielding the babies from the draft. The other pulled out a small bottle, already warmed, and offered it to Lily. Her hands shook as she took it, lowering it to Olivia's lips. The baby latched instantly, her cries muffled into small, desperate gulps. Relief flooded Lily's chest so sharply it hurt. She pressed a kiss to her daughter's damp forehead, whispering, "It's okay, sweetheart. It's okay now." The men exchanged a brief glance before one of them handed her a sleek black envelope. Mr. Thornhill asked that you read this. He will call you within the hour. Lily blinked at the envelope, her mind refusing to process the words. Call her? Personally? No, it couldn't be real. But the weight of the paper in her hand, embossed with Thornhill seal, told her otherwise. She clutched it against her chest, too afraid to open it, too afraid to know what it might say. The men gave a final nod and left, their boots echoing down the stairwell. Moments later, the thunder of the helicopter blades grew louder, then faded into the night sky, carrying away the proof that any of this had happened. Silence returned, broken only by the soft suckling of Olivia at the bottle and Noah's sleepy whimpers. The apartment smelled of warm formula and clean cotton from the new blankets. For the first time in weeks, the air didn't reek of despair, it held possibility. Lily sank onto the mattress, the envelope trembling in her hand. She stared at the seal, her heart racing. Somewhere, in a world of steel towers and wealth beyond imagining, Alexander Thornhill had read her words she had meant for a friend. Words she thought had destroyed her dignity, and instead of turning away, he had sent a helicopter. Her lips moved soundlessly as she whispered into the quiet, "Why me?" But deep down, beneath her fear and disbelief, a spark flickered, dangerous, thrilling. It was the spark of hope. The black envelope lay heavy in Lily's hands long after the man had gone. She traced the seal with her fingertip, afraid to break it, as if doing so would end the fragile dream hovering around her apartment. Olivia had finished her bottle and slept soundly in the crib, her lips still puckered, while Noah's tiny chest rose and fell in rhythm beside her. For once, the apartment was quiet, but Lily's heart thundered like a war drum. She told herself not to hope. Hope was dangerous. Hope was what had shattered when the hospital laid her off weeks after maternity leave. Hope was what had died when her landlord slid another eviction notice under the door. And yet, against every lesson life had beaten into her, hope was alive now, pulsing through her veins as she tore open the envelope. Inside was a single card, sleek and cold, the Thornhill Enterprises crest embossed in silver. Beneath it, only one line, "Keep your phone on. I'll call soon." Her breath caught. He was really going to call. Not an assistant, not a secretary, not some faceless messenger him. She placed the card on the nightstand and sat back, her legs trembling. What would she say? How could she possibly speak to a man like that? She was wearing a stained sweatshirt, surrounded by peeling wallpaper and bills she couldn't pay. He was a billionaire, a man the world bowed to. Their worlds weren't just different, they were galaxies apart. The phone buzzed. Her stomach dropped, her throat tightening as she fumbled to answer. Hello? Miss Morgan. The voice was smooth, deep, controlled. It carried the weight of authority, but beneath it lingered something unexpected, a quiet, human steadiness that held her in place. Lily's mouth went dry. Mr. Thornhill. You don't need to apologize again. His words cut gently, but firmly. I read your message. I sent help. Now, I want to hear from you directly. Tell me what happened. Tears welled in her eyes at the simple question. No one had asked her that. Not her landlord. Not her old co-workers. Not even Melanie, who offered her money out of pity, but never asked for the story behind it. Lily swallowed hard, her voice breaking as she whispered, I lost my job. I thought I could manage, I tried so hard. But the twins, they need more than I can give. I'm failing them. Silence hung on the line. She imagined him sitting in some vast penthouse office, the city glowing beneath him, listening to a girl in a crumbling apartment confess her shame. You are not failing them, Thornhill said at last, his tone sharper now. You're standing in the fire, holding two children who depend on you for everything. That is not failure, Miss Morgan. That is survival. The words pierced her like light through storm clouds. For the first time in months, she didn't feel like a failure. She felt, seen. But why? She asked, her voice trembling. Why do you care? I'm nobody to you. Just a mistake. There was another pause. She could hear faint clicks in the background, like a pen tapping against glass, and then his voice. Lower now, because once, I was the one who failed. My wife, my daughter. His words trailed off, strained, before he caught himself. I know what it means to lose everything, and I will not ignore someone standing where I once stood. Her chest ached. The untouchable CEO was not untouchable after all. He carried scars, shadows she couldn't yet see, but they were there, etched into his voice. I don't want charity, she whispered fiercely. Though her hands shook, and I don't give charity, he replied. I make investments. Tonight, I invested in you and your children. Tomorrow, we'll discuss the rest. Her heart pounded at his words, cryptic, powerful, frightening. What do you mean? You'll know soon enough, he said. His tone softened, almost imperceptibly. For now, feed your children, rest, and keep your phone close. You'll be hearing from me again. The line clicked, leaving her in silence, her pulse racing. Lily sat motionless, the twins breathing softly in their crib, her phone still glowing in her hand. The apartment felt different now, as if the air itself carried the weight of his promise. She stared at the cracked ceiling, every nerve alive with fear and anticipation. Somehow, in one night, her entire world had shifted. A wrong text had summoned a man who lived far above the clouds into her rain-soaked life. And though she didn't know whether he was her salvation or her undoing, she knew one thing for certain: nothing would ever be the same again. Morning crept into Lily's apartment like an uninvited guest, pale light slipping through the cracked blinds. She hadn't slept. Every time her eyes fluttered closed, the echo of his voice returned, steady, commanding, impossible to ignore. You'll be hearing from me again. Those words looped in her head, twisting her exhaustion into a tight knot of fear and hope. The twins stirred beside her, their small cries demanding attention, grounding her in the chaos of bottles and diapers. She moved on instinct, but her thoughts were elsewhere. What would a man like Alexander Thornhill want with her? He had already sent supplies, more than she could ever have asked for. That should have been the end of it. Instead, it felt like the beginning of something larger, something she wasn't prepared for. By mid-morning, the rumble of an unfamiliar engine rattled the street below. Lily peeked through the blinds and froze. A sleek black car sat at the curb, its paint gleaming even beneath the weak sun. The driver stepped out, tall and composed, dressed in a crisp suit that looked impossibly out of place in her rundown neighborhood. He adjusted his cufflinks and glanced up at her window before pulling a phone from his pocket. Seconds later, Lily's own phone buzzed. Miss Morgan, the voice said when she answered, low and professional. I'm here on behalf of Mr. Thornhill. He requests your presence at his headquarters this afternoon. The children will be cared for by licensed staff he has arranged. Transportation, security, everything is provided. Her throat tightened. His headquarters? Yes, ma'am. Departure in 1 hour. Please be ready. The call ended before she could protest. She stood frozen, phone in hand, heart racing. The headquarters of Thornhill Enterprises wasn't just a building. It was a fortress of glass and steel, a symbol of untouchable power that towered over the city. And she was being summoned there like someone, an employee, a beggar he'd chosen to inspect, a mistake he wanted to examine more closely. Panic surged through her chest. She had nothing to wear but thrift store jeans and her faded sweatshirt. No makeup, no polished shoes, no armor against the glittering world that awaited her. She almost wanted to refuse, to hide inside the four walls of her small apartment and pretend last night had never happened. But then she looked at Noah and Olivia, their tiny faces soft in sleep, and she knew she couldn't. This wasn't about her anymore. When the knock came an hour later, she opened the door to the driver, who carried himself like a soldier. He guided her down the steps, taking the diaper bag from her trembling hands. The car's leather seats swallowed her as she slid inside, clutching the twins to her chest. The city blurred past in silence, every block taking her farther from the world she knew. The closer they came to downtown, the more her nerves frayed. Skyscrapers stabbed the sky, their mirrored glass reflecting clouds and sunlight. At the center of it all rose the headquarters of Thornhill Enterprises, a monolith of silver and black steel, so tall it seemed to scrape the heavens. She had seen it once from afar, a landmark she never imagined she would enter. Now it loomed before her, doors opening with a hushed precision as security guards stepped forward. The driver opened her door. "This way, Miss Morgan." Her legs shook as she carried the twins, her second-hand sneakers squeaking against the marble floor inside the lobby. The space was cathedral-like, ceilings soaring above with beams of glass and light. Men and women in tailored suits moved briskly around her, glancing with fleeting curiosity at the young mother clutching to infants. She felt their eyes, felt their silent questions. What was she doing here, where she didn't belong? But then everything still died from across the lobby. A figure emerged, tall, broad-shouldered, immaculately dressed in a charcoal suit that looked sculpted to his form. His presence commanded attention without a single word. Alexander Thornhill. Lily's breath caught. She had seen his face in magazines, on television, the hard lines of his jaw, the piercing eyes that seemed to strip away facades. In person, his presence was overwhelming, as if the air itself shifted around him. He stopped only a few feet away, his gaze lowering not to her face at first, but to the two babies cradled in her arms. For the briefest moment, something flickered in his expression. Not pity, not curiosity, something deeper, sharper, like recognition. "You came," he said simply, his voice carrying the same quiet authority she had heard through the phone. Lily tightened her hold on the twins, her voice barely a whisper. "I didn't think I had a choice." His lips curved, not quite a smile, but not cold either. "There's always a choice. But you made the right one." The lobby around them seemed to vanish, the hum of footsteps and conversations fading as his eyes met hers. Suspense wrapped around her like a vice. She felt exposed, fragile, yet unable to look away. "This isn't about charity," he continued, his tone firm. "It's about possibility, for you, for them." He gestured slightly toward the twins. "But before I explain further, let's get you somewhere more private." Two attendants appeared at his signal, their movements seamless, professional. One gently offered to take the diaper bag. Another extended arms to carry the babies if she wished. Lily hesitated, clutching them tighter, but Thornhill's gaze softened. "They'll be safe," he said quietly, almost gently. "Safer than you've ever known, and for reasons she couldn't explain." Lily believed him as she followed him across the marble floor, her legs still trembling. One thought burned in her mind like a brand. Her life was no longer her own. She had stepped into his world now, and nothing in it was accidental. The elevator door slid shut with a muted sigh, sealing Lily inside a cocoon of glass and steel. She stood stiffly, her twins safe in the arms of the attendants, who had insisted gently but firmly on helping her. The motion of the ascent was smooth, but her heart thundered as if she were climbing into the clouds themselves. Beside her, Alexander Thornhill seemed carved from another world entirely. He didn't fidget, didn't blink nervously as she did. He simply stood, hands clasped behind his back, gaze fixed ahead. His presence filled the small space, heavy, but not suffocating. Like the hum of power itself, the floor numbers ticked upward in silence until the elevator opened to a sprawling office that looked more like a penthouse than a workplace. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the city stretched beneath them, towers glittering like fallen stars. A wall of bookshelves lined one side, while sleek, modern furniture filled the other. At the far end, a large desk of polish would gleam beneath the sunlight. "Come," Thornhill said, his voice deep and steady. He led her to a sitting area, gesturing for her to take the couch. The attendants moved wordlessly to a side chamber with the twins, leaving the door slightly ajar so Lily could still hear the soft coos and gurgles. Relief steadied her, but her body still buzzed with tension. Thornhill poured water into a crystal glass and handed it to her before sitting across from her. His posture bright, his eyes sharp yet unreadable. "You didn't sleep last night," he observed. He rushed to her cheeks. "I know." "Not really. You were waiting for me," he said, not as a question, but as fact. She shifted, unsure how to answer. "I wasn't. I didn't know what to expect." "That's fair," he replied, leaning back slightly. "But I did. I knew you'd come." Suspense pressed against her chest. She clutched the glass tighter. Why me? There are thousands of people struggling every day. You don't send helicopters for them." Asterisk for the first time, his gaze faltered not in weakness, but in something closer to memory. "When my wife went into labor, she died before they could save her. My daughter lived for only 3 hours. His jaw clenched, his voice steady, but edged with pain. "I stood in a hospital room with more money than most nations, and none of it mattered. I couldn't save them." The confession hung in the air, raw and unpolished. Lily's breath hitched. She hadn't expected vulnerability from a man who commanded empires. He leaned forward, his eyes locking onto hers. "So when I read your message, when I saw the word twins, I didn't see a stranger. I saw a moment I once lost, and I made a choice not to look away this time." Her heart clenched. Part of her wanted to soften, to let gratitude flow, but pride held her tongue. "But you don't know me. You don't know if I'm worth your time, your resources." His lips curved, not in amusement, but something more resolute. "That's why you're here, to find out." He rose and crossed to his desk, retrieving a folder embossed with her name. "You applied for a position here months ago. Administrative support. Do you remember?" Her eyes widened. "Ah, yes. I never heard back." Asterisk, "You didn't because someone in HR discarded it," he said sharply, the irritation in his voice cutting through. "They saw gaps in your employment history, your lack of prestigious connections, and they dismissed you. But I don't believe in paper decisions. I believe in people." He placed the folder before her, his gaze unwavering. "I'm offering you a position. Not pity, not charity. A real job with real pay, childcare, housing assistance, everything you need to stand again. Because if you're strong, your children will be strong. And if they're strong, they'll have a chance at the future I once lost." Asterisk, Lily's chest tightened until she could barely breathe. The words felt too large, too unreal. "You can't just fix my life like that." "I can," he replied evenly. "But the question is, will you let me?" The silence stretched, charged with unspoken tension. Lily stared at the folder, her reflection faint in its glossy surface. Pride screamed for her to refuse. Fear begged her to accept. The twins stirred faintly in the next room, their small voices whispering through the crack in the door. Asterisk, her hands shook as she whispered, "And if I fail, then you fail," he said simply. "But not because no one gave you the chance." Asterisk, the room seemed to spin around her, the weight of his offer pressing down like a tidal wave. She had stepped into his world, and now he was offering her a piece of it, not out of pity, but because he saw something in her she couldn't yet see in herself. Asterisk, and for the first time in a long time, Lily wondered if she had been chosen not by accident, but by something far greater, something that refused to let either of them stay broken. Night had swallowed the city by the time Lily left the polished offices of Thornhill Enterprises. The driver guided her back into the sleek car, the twins bundled in warm blankets finer than anything she had ever touched. Through the tinted windows, the skyline glowed a glittering kingdom of glass and steel. But even as the car pulled away, Lily knew the true storm wasn't behind her. It was still coming. She replayed every word of his offer in her head. A job, stability, childcare, housing, the kind of chance she had prayed for in whispers at night, not believing it would ever arrive. And yet here it was presented not by fate or luck, but by a man whose eyes carried grief as deep as her own. Still, questions gnawed at her. Why her? Why now? What was Alexander Thornhill really after? 2 days later, she had her answer. The summons came in the evening, sharp and sudden. Another driver, another car. Mr. Thornhill requests your presence, the man said, offering no further explanation. Anxiety knotted Lily's stomach as she gathered the twins, her mind racing with worst-case scenarios. She had barely settled into the small apartment his company had already arranged, and now she was being pulled back into his orbit. This time, the car didn't stop at the towering headquarters. Instead, it glided through the private gates of an estate perched high above the city. The mansion that rose before her was carved from stone and glass, sprawling across manicured grounds like something out of another world. Security lights cast silver halos across the driveway as the car eased to a stop. The door opened, and there he was, Alexander Thornhill, waiting on the steps, hands tucked in his pockets. No suit tonight, just a black sweater and slacks. The kind of clothing that made him look less like a CEO, and more like a man haunted by sleepless nights. "Miss Morgan," he said, his voice carrying easily through the cool night air. "Come inside." She followed him through echoing halls into a wing of the mansion that felt different. Not grand, not polished, but quiet. The walls were painted a soft ivory, the lighting warm instead of stark. As they walked, Lily noticed doors closed tightly, as though guarding secrets. Then, without warning, he stopped before one and rested his hand on the handle. "I've kept this room locked for years," he said, his voice low. "No one enters it. Not staff, not guests, only me." Her breath caught. He pushed the door open. Inside lay a nursery. The air smelled faintly of lavender, though the scent was years old. A crib sat against the wall, untouched but perfectly made. Tiny clothes hung in a closet, never worn. Toys lined the shelves, their colors faded from dust and time. It was a room built for a child who never lived long enough to use it. Lily's knees weakened, her arms tightening instinctively round her twins. This was hers, she whispered. His jaw tightened, and he nodded. "My daughter, Emily, she died the same night my wife did. For years, I kept this room exactly as it was meant to be untouched, frozen, a monument to everything I lost." He drew in a slow breath, his eyes dark. "I thought it would stay that way forever." Lily's throat ached. She wanted to speak, to offer comfort, but the words withered on her tongue. Thornhill turned, his gaze falling on Noah and Olivia. The hardened lines of his face softened, almost imperceptibly. "But when I read your message, when I saw those words, the twins haven't eaten properly in days. I thought maybe fate had sent me a chance, not to replace what I lost. Nothing ever could, but to use my grief for something more than silence." He stepped closer, his voice dropping to something raw, almost fragile. "I don't want to buy you, Miss Morgan. I don't want to control you. I want to give your children what I never got to give mine. A safe home, a future, and perhaps..." He paused, the weight of his next words hanging in the air like thunder. "Perhaps a chance for me to feel like a father again, even if only in borrowed moments." The room went still. The ticking of an old clock echoed softly against the nursery walls. Lily's chest heaved as tears blurred her vision. Pride, fear, gratitude, grief all of it crashed together inside her. She thought of her mother, gone too soon, of the night she had whispered promises to her twins that she didn't know if she could keep. And now, here stood a man with the power to change everything, yet broken enough to need her just as much as she needed him. Slowly, she stepped toward the crib. She lowered Noah first, laying him gently on the soft blanket inside. His tiny body stirred, then settled, his breathing deep and even. Olivia followed, her little fist curling as if claiming the space as her own. For the first time, the nursery lived. Alexander Thornhill's eyes glistened not with the cold control of a businessman, but with something Lily had never expected to see in him: release. The weight he had carried for years seemed to lift, if only slightly. As the twins slept where his daughter never had, Lily turned to him, her voice shaking. Maybe this wasn't a mistake at all. His gaze met hers, steady and unflinching. "No," he said quietly. It was destiny, and as the night deepened around them, Lily realized that a single wrong text had not just saved her children, it had cracked open the sealed heart of a man who had thought himself untouchable. Their lives, broken and reshaped by loss, had collided, and in that collision, something new, something powerful had been born.